Hello, and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to take a look at repairing the rear windshield wiper on this 2004 Chevy Tahoe. Now, the problem with my rear wiper is that it doesn't seem to work at all. I bought this truck, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and it's been like that since I bought it. And judging by the condition of the wiper blade and everything, I don't think this thing has worked in quite some time. Now, if memory serves me, I also think that the rear window defogger is also inoperative, but we'll double check that along the way too. The first thing I'm going to do is check the circuits for voltage at the main fuse box here under the hood. So I've pulled the cover off the fuse box, and looking at the diagram here, the two fuses I'm interested in are this one here, this 30 amp fuse, which is this green one here that hopefully you guys can see. And the other one that I'm interested in is the 25 amp one for the rear wiper, and that one is this tannish colored one that's here, that's just out of your view, but trust me, it's there. So I'm going to take the negative terminal of my meter, and I'm going to put that right on the negative terminal of the battery, which is right over here, and very accessible. I'm going to take the positive lead, and I'm going to touch it to the metal tabs that are exposed on the top of the fuse there. As you can see, I'm getting about 12.5 volts on the rear defogger fuse, and that is on both sides of the fuse, so that tells me that the fuse itself is good too, without having to pull it and look at it. So now let's check the rear wiper fuse. I'll move the probe over there, and I'm getting 12.5 volts on both legs of that fuse as well. So that means we don't have any problems between the fuse box and the battery. We can now move a little further forward and see if the problem lies elsewhere. So now we're taking a look at the fuse box that's in the truck just to the left of the steering wheel, sort of at the end of the dash, where the dash is sort of hidden behind the door when it's closed. Anyway, there's a 15 amp fuse right up here where my finger is, the very topmost one up there, above that red 10 amp fuse and that other blue 15 amp fuse that is associated with the rear wiper. So we're going to check the voltage on that one with the key in the on position and see what we get. Hopefully you can see this in the shot, but I've got the negative lead on a screw here that's on the body of the truck, so that's connected to ground. And I'll put my positive lead on the tab of the fuse here like I did before. Hopefully you can see on the meter, hopefully it's in the shot and the screen isn't glared out by the sun or anything, but you can see I'm getting about 12 volts on that fuse as well. And on both legs, so that means that fuse is good too. So the problem lies elsewhere. We're not dealing with anything as simple as a blown fuse. Okay. So another possible problem could lie in this switch. This switch could be bad, but just intuition and instinct tell me that this switch is fine, that there's no problem here. So I'm going to skip it and move to the back of the truck and check things out back there. So the piece of trim that surrounds the window, it looks like there's two clips holding it in here. That's on the latch for the glass. So I've opened up the glass, and we just need to push these center pins in, and then we should be able to just pop these out. So that obviously takes care of the window trim. Now let's get that back panel out. So the trick for the back panel is to remove this screw that holds in the trim piece around the handle. So now we can pull the handle out, and the rest of this should come out now, I think. We're inside the back of the truck with the back hatch closed. And I've got the windshield wiper turned on, and of course the key is on too. And you can probably hear it in the microphone. This thing is making sort of a thumping noise. I hadn't heard that before, but it's readily apparent now with all the trim pieces out of the way and sitting back here. But you can kind of hear this thing clunking. But while we're here, let's just pull this connector off and just do a quick voltage check. So I don't have a wiring diagram pulled up on this vehicle yet, but my suspicion is that on this wiring harness there's some fatter wires and some skinnier wires. And my suspicion would be that we'll get 12 volts on the fatter wires. And those will be the wires that power the things like the motor and the power locks back here. And if we're getting something less on those, then maybe we've got an issue somewhere else. But let's just double check and make sure. I've got my meter probe in the receptacle for the orange wire, and I've grounded the other probe, and you should be able to see that I am getting 12 volts there on the meter. Let's check a few of these other ones and see what we get. Okay, on the next one, the gray wire, we're also getting 12 volts. The next wire is the green wire, and when we check that one, I'm getting 0 volts, so maybe that's a ground wire. Not sure. And then the last one at the end there, that black wire, is also giving us 0 volts. Well, maybe that's a ground, I don't know. Again, I got to pull up a wiring diagram on this truck and see. Now we've got that one skinnier purple wire. I'm just curious as to what that one is. Well, that one's 11.3, so I'm going to assume for the moment, without looking at the wiring diagram, that the voltage is good and that this motor is no good. So while I'm back here, I'm going to check the defroster as well. So I've got the wire disconnected from the glass, or the terminal on the glass rather, which is right there, just an ear terminal up there. And so I'll put the So I've got the probe in there. I've got it turned on the dashboard, and I'm going to just ground the other lead. And I'm getting 12 volts on that, so there is power to it. So one more check that I'll do on the defroster, and this is going to be a little difficult to show just because I don't have enough room in here to get the camera to take everything in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a resistance check between this terminal of the defroster and the identical terminal that's on the other side. And that should basically measure some resistance, basically like a resistor would, because that's all this is. And if we get an open, that means we've got a break in one of these traces. So while I put the probes on the terminals, you guys can keep an eye on the meter. Well, we've got 1.2 ohms. So that's kind of interesting. That means that the traces on this are good. So I'm a little confused as to why this doesn't work. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this motor out of here, and let's put it on the bench and see what we can do with it. In order to get the motor out, I'm going to first need to remove the rear windshield wiper. And the first step in doing that is to pull this plastic cover off that's on here. So I'm going to use this 13mm wrench and loosen this nut. So let's try and pull this off of here now. Before I try and pull this straight off, I'm going to lift this up and get this tab out of the groove on the back of the truck there. And now I should be able to work this out. I imagine it's going to be a little tight, and I may have to persuade it a little bit with some force. Let's try the spudger tool here. See if this can help pull this off of here. Whoop! Yeah, that popped off a little quicker than I thought it would. So now we should be able to just pull this hose off of here. And now we've got it divorced from the truck. So I put the nut back on this shaft just so I wouldn't lose it. But now I'm going to take a 1-inch wrench and loosen up this larger nut. So I got the nut off, but this just seems like a plastic nut, and it looks like the threads are kind of stripped out now. So I don't know if we can reuse that or not, but we'll see. Now that we got the outer nut loosened up and removed, I should be able to just take off these two bolts here, and this should come out. Okay, you can see what comes out is a bolt, and sort of a sleeve washer that's captive on the end of the bolt. So now I think this will just come out of here. Now of course this cable is in the way, so we have to deal with this. But that should do it. Can you open that? Okay. So you can see we have the motor assembly out. When I pulled it out from the truck, this was still on the outside. I didn't realize this was here. I should have taken that off first, but when I pulled this out, it was on the outside and it fell off, but I recovered it from the driveway. So looking at the motor here, it looks like there's some corrosion and stuff in here, so hopefully it's good and we can just take this apart and clean it up. I guess it remains to be seen. Let's put it on the bench and see what we can do with it. So now to seal up this hole, while I have the wiper motor out of the truck, I'm going to use this piece of camouflaged duct tape to cover the hole. That'll keep out any critters and moisture, and of course being camouflaged, nobody will see it. I originally thought that this might be one video, but it seems like it's getting a little bit long, so I'm going to break it here. The next video in this series is going to show how I disassembled the wiper motor assembly, cleaned it up, lubricated it, and put it all back together. If you'd like to watch that video, there'll be a link to it in the description below, or you can click the thumbnail on the end screen. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. Thanks for watching.